What is going on, guys? I'm about to go live right now with Tim English, but you guys might know him under a different name under Every Calorie Counts. So today we're going to be talking about damage control post-contest prep, talk about reverse dieting, talk about, what to expect when you are in that post-prep period, talk about like maybe when we like to implement, starting to have a little bit more flexibility after the diet, talk about pulling fat burners, pulling other types of drugs. Is it good to start your off season or your rebound phase, as soon as you wrap up prep? And we'll discuss, any questions that you guys may have just trickling in watching us live. But I'm going to wait until he is in the chat, and then we will go ahead and get this party started. He said he was going to be eating a meal, so it'll be like dinner and a show for him. So I'm going to go. This is like the worst part. It's like the awkward moment where you're waiting for someone to like hop on your live so you can invite them in. It's kind of like the same awkward moment where people are singing happy birthday to you and you're just like sitting there with your dick in your hand, just like, yeah, let me blow up my damn candles. Let me eat my cake. Oh, cake sounds so good right now. Holy shit. So Tim is invited, but we'll see if he pops on. If not, what I might need to do is pop back in. Oh, there he is. Cool. Waiting on you, Tim. Oh, it says he's unable to join. Well, fuck's sake. Tim, can you invite yourself or ask request? He said no. He declined. Get in here, Tim. Jesus. No, it's not Tim's fault. We love Tim. There we go.
There we go. How you doing?
I'm doing well, and yourself?
Not bad, not bad. I got to pop some Morpho Brain before you get started here so you get the absolute best of me, or brain, I guess, at this point. But
I literally, everything is still Morpho or like Brainogen to me, because
yeah,
like it's been rebranded so many different times, and it's still the same good shit.
yeah. As long as we're on the same page, we're all good. And on that note too, I have zero etiquette as far as like not speaking over people or like being rude and like stopping in the middle of a sentence or something like that. So when that does happen eventually, I apologize ahead of time and I'll do my best to not be a douche.
All good. I mean, you can only do so much. You are wearing a New York Yankees hat. Like, we can only expect so much from you.
I'm better than everybody else, so I got to make sure that I like bring myself down a notch.
That's right. That's right. What's your meal? Was it meal 4 or 5 right now?
For me, meal two, meal two, and I don't even want to tell you what I ate because at the end of the day, it's gonna make me sound like a pussy. So I'm not even gonna go. I had Greek yogurt and some Raisin Bran mixed in there with some raspberries on
Oh,
top.
Raisin
So
Bran is the fucking tits. I
of course,
love Raisin Bran. So if anyone like says Raisin Bran's gross, get the fuck
no, I
out of
don't
here.
I think it's more along the lines of like, I'm eating Greek yogurt as meal two, and it's like, I know it's a big one, it's popular and whatnot, but I don't know, it makes me feel less of a man when I'm eating yogurt. No offense to anybody, but
Gee,
just saying.
you gotta do what you gotta do. Like, there's no rules as long as you're being consistent, you know?
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm extremely inconsistent at this point. Actually, I'm just trying to stay alive. You know what I mean? I'm
He's like,
trying to
I'm
not
just trying
die.
to keep this shit
Yeah,
afloat.
exactly.
That's awesome. But yeah, so we're talking about damage control post prep. And obviously, the post prep period, say that 5 times quickly, is very, very volatile for a number of reasons. Like, obviously, we have this, show debut. You've been prepping for, at least over 16 weeks, depending upon, your flavor or how, like, in the trenches you really needed to dig for your show division. But you did the show, you presented your package, you got the placement that you got, and then crickets. Like, your emotional state is flatlined because you've been on for prep the past however many weeks. maybe food was, being slowly reversed up into your show. Maybe you really had to still diet during peak week, but regardless, the food focus is high. Your brain cognition is low, your mood is low. And now what? What is your, like, something that you help your athletes through when it comes to that time post prep where they're just kind of like in limbo?
Yeah, I think honestly, I think that to me, I think the best way to approach that is probably not necessarily waiting to that point to start addressing it, if that makes sense, right? Like that's something that we need to start talking about, whether it's a week out, 2 weeks out, depending on the person, understanding their psyche. I think maybe that's something that we need to start to discuss it, a few weeks prior to getting to that point so that it's initially in their head, they understand it, and now we can start to amplify those thoughts as we get closer and closer to the show. And then immediately post show, it's like, okay, listen, we talked about this post show blues, dopamine drop. Like we get it. But like what we want to do right now is honestly, this is something that, some people might disagree with this concept, but I might even go as far as trying to scare the shit out of somebody as far as that reverse diet is concerned and having them stick to that reverse diet, which again, I understand some people might look at that and say, we've already created such a relationship with food during the prep. And, do we really want to push that now post prep? And my thought process would always be, well, yeah, that's my point is that we already did all this, as far as our relationship with food is concerned, as far as all these other things to be considered of, like now's the time that we need to start to repair that. But that doesn't mean that we automatically go out to Chili's and have all you can eat buffalo boneless wings or something like that. You know what I mean? Like we need to make sure that we're working this through in a relatively responsible way. And for me, honestly, I think a big thing, especially with women, has been, recognizing, the impact that rebound effect can have, or where their metabolism is relative to the amount of food they want to ingest at that particular point, and kind of seeing a lot of those results diminish quickly, right? Because there is that understanding, like, hey, let's prime this person too. We're not going to be able to maintain here. Like sooner or later, like you're going to start to see those lines go away. We're going to start to see, maybe even a little bit of inflammation come back on. That's part of a normal dieting pattern. These things are going to change the way our body looks, the way our body feels, and all that. We need to prime ourselves mentally for that. But the other side of that is we've all seen the dreaded rebound and what that can look like too. Right. So it's one of those things where it's like there's a happy medium there. And let's try to find that happy medium, which also primes us for a healthy off season, make it a successful off season, an efficient off season as far as muscle development is concerned. So I think it's proper comprehension leading into that, and not waiting until we get there when the signaling's all jacked up and we're hungrier than we are passionate at that particular point about results, right? So that way we're kind of priming them. They're ready for that. They understand what's to come. And then from there, I think if it was anything more, specifically as it relates to like programming, it's really trying to manage, the way that I'm building the plan, as far as their macros are concerned, to be able to mitigate hunger the best I can. And by that, I might really look to increase the significant amount of calories via protein, first and foremost, to generate a little bit more satiety, and then kind of backfill carbs and fats from there, depending on how their last couple of weeks of prep went.
Absolutely. And of course, this is all person dependent as well, like how you might do something. But I'm in the camp where, in terms of what happens post show, we need to make sure your mental state is in a good spot, because it's not going to be, right. So you do that preparatory, like that pep talk, the team huddle before the actual game presents itself, because you need to have a good noggin going in, not only for show day, but for all the emotions, for all of the shit that happens post show, like you were talking about the post show blues. And something that I found to be really beneficial when it comes to like getting through that time period is making sure we're still checking in, like 2 days, one day after, 2 days after, not even just to see how like the night prior went with like the family meal, the off play meal that you have maybe like after show, but it's like making sure that, like, hey, that I'm still here for you. Because I think a lot of people just hire a coach who goes, I want to do a bodybuilding show, and they don't really understand what they're signing themselves up for when it comes to that post show. And maybe their contract ends, or the coach doesn't give a fuck, and they're just left in limbo, just kind of floating around, not understanding that, like, in order to have a successful off season, you need to enter into more of a recovery setting. So making sure that, yes, food is higher, so that way we can start to normalize those ghrelin and leptin hormones. Yes, put body fat back on, because where you are lean, I don't care if you're a big bodybuilder, I don't care if you're a bikini athlete, where you are currently at is not where you need to be living out when it comes to your body homeostasis, maintenance, all of that shit. So we need to like learn to let go, because for the last like 20 weeks you knew nothing but restriction for the most part. Like it was either cutting food or adding calories. You were restricting like social events and stuff like that. So now is the time that I like to recover, and then also goes out with the social events. Like, listen, we're still packing meals at this point, because I don't care who you are. If you're the most disciplined motherfucker out on the planet, 2 weeks post show, you free meals, I don't think are a good option. That is just like, I mean, feel free to disagree if you do
No,
something else, but I
I'm
think,
with you. It's opening up Pandora's box for
oh
sure.
my god, it's like opening up Pandora's box and like just fucking putting a grenade down there and just
Yeah.
fucking around and finding
You know,
out. But
the crazy thing is though that people you really can't comprehend it until you've done it, and you know what I mean. And when I say that, I mean not necessarily fucked up, but been through that process of prep. Like you're talking about somebody that's never prepped before, it's their first time, and obviously at that point they're going to understand the dysregulation of hunger that they have. But what they don't understand yet, potentially, is the dysregulation and satisfaction they get, the leptin aspect of things, where it's like you can eat and eat and eat, and it's not going to be enough. You're gonna want more in that moment. Once you pop, you just can't stop, kind of deal. And it's really one of those ones where I think some people will, they'll honestly, for lack of better verbs, lie to themselves or
yep,
justify in their mind, make these excuses. It's like, oh, I can do it. I can have a couple. In prep, I did this and I stopped myself here. And I'm like, it's a totally different ball game.
yep.
Yeah, it's a totally different ball game. We don't have that thing sitting in front of you anymore. So, yeah, it's definitely one of those things where I think we have to recognize, the reality of like cheat meals, free meals, or eating off plan that soon post show.
Absolutely. I don't know about you, but I'm a big fan of meal plans, especially in prep, because it's like I want to be able to, control exactly it is what we're eating when it comes to like making sure we have vitamins and minerals, obviously, because that can obviously impact stalls. But it's really important to still have that structure post prep. Because I think a lot of people, since they're not in prep mode anymore, they're like, they go from prep to off season. And yes, like the recovery phase is part of your off season, but I would almost argue it's still part of prep, because you're such in a vulnerable position with your mental state, with like your body image, that like we're not growing muscle at this point. Like we're either like, getting back to some more inflammation from, diet changes, body fat accrual, maybe some muscle glycogen, maybe some muscle regrowth from if you potentially lost muscle mass in prep, depending upon how harsh you did it, whether you're not your natural enhanced, whatever. But it's one of those things that like people want to go from 0 to 100 because they are motivated post prep, especially if their feedback was to grow, but they jump the gun and kind of forget to recover first. Because I'm in
Mm-hmm.
the camp with you being in contest prep shape. Your body, yes, is very insulin sensitive, so you think it would be like this holy grail of growth, but everything else is shit.
Mm-hmm.
So like I'm not a big fan of like, yo, let's keep the drugs in, let's start growing. But of course, like if you have a different modus operandum, you tell me.
No, I think a lot of us have kind of allowed the whole concept of the like growth rebound or whatever with the drugs post and really trying to push it post. I think a lot of us have found the reality behind that just isn't very favorable for like actual tissue gains. We're really just pushing down a path where it's a lot more side effects than it's worth. I'm not going to say I've never done it with myself specifically, never with a client. I don't think, not that I can remember off the top of my head, but with myself I have. And again, that was a long time ago, and it's just something that I think a lot of us have kind of grown out of, that we recognize that. I think, honestly, I really feel like all you need to do is be really conditioned. And like this might be a tough one, I think, for some women to comprehend as far as bikini is concerned, right? Like some women, not all, like obviously there's a differing level of adaptation that we have from metabolism to metabolism. Some women have to die to get into shape even for a bikini. But, obviously we're talking about those more conditioned classes. They would understand like, those last like 4 to 6 weeks of prep for some of us, especially, myself, like I'm the type where it's like, I can start prep at 2:30. I'm still eating, 1,400 to 1,200 calories my last 4 weeks of prep. It fucking sucks. And it's like, you're like people talk about cinder blocks, like their feet are cinder blocks, their legs are flamed and swollen from all the cardio stuff. Like it's one of those ones where it's like when you get to that level of conditioning, post show, you can feel that your body is not ready for growth in any way, shape, or form. Like you could barely make it through the fucking day, 2, 3 p.m. like you're dead. So it's like to think that you can handle substantial amounts of training at that point, and be able to benefit from it, I just think isn't really realistic anyway. And it's probably something most of us did when we were young and stupid, as far as pushing drugs and whatnot when we were younger. Like, nay, but yeah, no, I think I'm with you on that. I also think that it's the recovery aspect of it only yields more as far as the outcomes of muscle development down the road, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when we're talking about a lower inflamed state, like all the potential issues we could talk about as far as potential gut complications that came on during contest prep. Again, even the level of food that you're consuming at that point. I mean, none of it is conducive to growth yet. You know what I mean? In order to work our way up to that point, it's like you might as well take that time as a recovery phase just the same, get a clean bill of health. And if anything, the drugs are going to work better, the growth phase is going to work better, et cetera.
Exactly. And you actually mentioned a really good aspect about training. Like, you're probably not even going to be motivated to train. There are some people, and there are different camps on how to handle post show. There are some people that honestly are so burned out from training, they might want 1 to 2 weeks off of no gym time. And of course, that you have to take that into consideration when it comes to, you're not necessarily burning as much calories as you think you're burning when
Yeah.
it comes to training sessions, even if you are training hard. But that's still being able to move around fluid, move around glycogen. So how do you like to handle post-show recovery when it comes to the training aspect?
And we're talking specifically women on this, right?
We can talk both genders.
All right. Well, I mean, obviously, to me, there is a definitive difference there, depending on again, the level at which we had to push, the conditioning level, and all that different stuff. But I'm sorry, the exact question was, how do I handle training specifically?
Yeah, like, are you someone that are like, yo, we're still going to be in the gym no matter what, or
No,
are
no.
you?
I personally, I would rather people take, again, especially if we're looking at the one thing that I think, and I don't want to sound like an arrogant douchebag when I say this, but like the one thing that I think that we've been pretty good with is like I am very I want a certain level of conditioning with my athletes. Like that's a one controllable factor we have. And I don't want to speak for anybody else when I say this, but like I'm not I don't know who's a really big body. I'm not Haney Rambod. I'm not Matt Jansen. I don't get the cream of the crop when it comes to genetically gifted athletes that I could just kind of put together a plan for them, let them do their things, and they're going to show up and they're going to win one way or the other, right? I have to really get the best out of our athletes. And I think when it comes to that, conditioning is something that we cannot leave on the table because it's one definitive controllable factor that we do have. So again, my point here is I am searching for that uber level conditioning, which is about everybody that we put on. And again, it's as per their division, calls for it. But when it comes down to that, we are in a state of severe fatigue, and just we need to be able to give the body time to recover, like we've been talking about here, in order to be able to benefit from the higher level of training. The problem that we run into there is the psychological component of this, right? People are so heavily motivated. And again, I think the fear, and maybe I can speak for both of us because it looks like you were going down this path too. The fear there is that it's too much motivation that ends up hindering, right, the recovery process, at least to a certain extent, right? And I also think perception is perception for us as coaches. Perception is a very valuable thing because we can give that client a different level of perception than maybe what they have at that particular time. And it's really a matter of kind of like breaking that down to them in a way they can possibly the way they can understand it and kind of buy into that information as best as possible. But to answer the question more specifically here, I am not a fan of going right into the gym and training balls to the wall, or like trying to do that to keep food up. I've seen people do in some cases, or again, just because we're highly motivated, think we're going to grow. If anything, I think it's and no disrespect to anybody that might think this way, but I just don't think it's smart. I think it's a much better option to recover first. Look at all the different things that we can look at there through a recovery and health phase, like I said before, gut health, all this different stuff, and prime our bodies better for a growth phase eventually. So for me, it's always I try to get a reverse diet done relatively quickly. And if I'm lucky, especially with a lot of my women, there is a period of time there where we are feeding the body up pre-show. So that post-show reverse, getting them back to a maintenance caloric intake is relatively quickly. So I'll usually say a reverse diet for me is anywhere between like 4 to 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, depending on the person, how big they are and how much food we have to get down. But then from there, I'm usually trying to get somebody to comprehend like, hey, we might have like a 16-week window post-show, 12 to 16-week window post-show. We're really looking at recovery, getting good labs done, because I don't pull labs immediately post-show. I usually wait until we put some things in place to be able to get positive outcomes with those labs. So again, I'm trying to get them to understand 12 to 16 weeks before we really push off as far as an off season is concerned. And that's if the labs are coming back good.
Yes. Yes, I think that's really, really good to talk about. Like, we talk about damage control, and I think it'd be good to define, like, what damage happens when it comes to contest prep. And you already hit a key player of digestion. Like digestive health can start to drastically decline because it is, yes, you were eating less, but you're still adding more stress into the system.
Mhm.
And like that causes gut issues just as much as eating shit foods, even in your off season, right? Talking about the adrenals, right? There are some people that, really go hard on the stimulants when it comes to feeling energy. So like maybe abusing caffeine, maybe, using like ECA stack, or maybe people are, using clenbuterol, yohimbine, maybe even some albuterol. So it's like one of those things where it's like you're still putting more stress into the system. You're still taxing your adrenals on top of the fact that when you start to get really, really conditioned, especially if you are in the bigger divisions, I mean, sleep is going to suffer regardless in some capacity because your body's just going to have such a hard time winding down and wanting to actually sleep because you're hungry. It wants to fucking feed you, right? We might start to see some blood glucose dysregulation with those cortisol patternings too. So we're thinking gut, adrenals, and then something that I don't think it's enough real talked about is the mental state still, just because it is so difficult to understand that you've been like locked in for so long, and now you're trying to, provide some level of normalcy back in your life and use the B word, balance, when it comes to trying to be a normal person again. Because like I said, you've been a bodybuilder for X amount of weeks, fucking all the checked boxes, nothing is missed, and now it's like you need to start giving back to yourself and other areas that were neglected, especially relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I'm with you as far as the mental component of things, as well as the just the general health side of things, the adrenal side of things specifically. I mean, I think again, what gets lost, for some people in that moment of prep is the reality they're numb during prep essentially, right? Like you talk about mental, but it's also, almost physically speaking, we're numb. Like even if you end up with an injury or whatever, like on a smaller level, it doesn't even fucking matter. You know what I mean? We're gonna keep going. We're not gonna miss that show date. It's there. Like I got cardio to do. I don't care how I feel. I'm gonna wake up. I'm gonna do the cardio. My meals are gonna be hit. It doesn't matter if I have like me getting a stomach bug during fucking contest prep. Never in my life. I might have gotten a stomach bug, but it's not going to stop me from eating my food. Like I'll be fucking eating while I'm fucking peeing out of my asshole at the same time. Like you got to get the job done. Like the bottom line is you're basically numb to everything that comes your way, and then that post show period, it's almost like everything's kind of the feelings coming back a little bit. You know what I mean? And it's one of those things that we have to be cognizant of, right? That these things were probably happening the entire time, right? And like now it's just we have to deal with them because again, we don't have that driver, that dopamine
Mm-hmm.
output there as far as, looking forward to that show and having that commitment that we are kind of all in for. So now these things are going to pop up. It's just a matter of, again, how we're handling the each individual case based on what things actually pop up via lab work, etc. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And also on the female side, like recovering your cycle,
Mm-hmm.
it is very, very rare that a female will have her cycle from the start of prep until she steps on stage. There are very, very few women have that level of fucking resiliency when it comes to the reproductive health. So honestly, I think it is really important, especially on the female side, to not just each week add in a rice cake, or you can smell 2 almonds this week. Like actually reversing the food up where we are seeing the scale move, we are seeing lines disappear, just so that way we finally get that hormonal signaling back when it comes to establishing a menstrual cycle. Because at that point, especially when we start to not only get the cycle back, but we start to see it
Right.
reoccurring, that for me is great signs that her body is like fully starting to heal now. And then we can also finally get labs done correctly because we can estimate, at least for a little bit, when she could be potentially ovulating. So that way we can actually see those levels of progesterone, see those levels of estrogen. And then also check things like testosterone and DHEA and DHEAS, because those are really important as well when it comes to, yes, the adrenal side, but still overall androgens. Because some females, you can see, even if they're natural athletes, like either toward the end of prep or post prep, they get nasty acne breakouts, even if they're not using androgens. And so it's one of those things you still want to make sure that all of your sexual reproductive hormones, your thyroid health as well, starts to come back online and recover. I think the big thing is because prep is not healthy. Yes, you can do it in healthy ways, but it's still not fucking healthy.
Right.
You need to focus on recovery so that way you get your health back and then have a baller off season.
Yeah, I think a big thing there that I'm very partial to or passionate about, however you want to verbalize it, is don't assume that just because you got your cycle back, everything is good to go.
Mhm.
All right. And even like you talked about ovulation, for example, like just because you got your cycle back, and I've seen this a couple of times, not often, but at least a couple of times where females did hold on to their cycle very late into prep before they lost it. And maybe we only lost it once or twice. Actually, believe it or not, I had a female who won multiple overalls, multiple first place finishes all in the same season for wellness, completely totally amazing, shredded, the whole nine. Literally got pregnant her last week of prep. Yeah. 12 weeks later, I'm like, you're eating like a fat ass. Like, you got to slow down, dude. Like, you're gaining too much weight. Like, what the fuck is going on with this reverse diet? You're lying to me. She's like, I'm not lying. I'm like, there's no chance, man. And then we get blood work back, and the doctor didn't say anything. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, you're, I don't know how to tell you this. Like, I don't know if it's a
I,
good thing. I don't know if it's a bad
I
thing.
bet
You're
you felt
pregnant.
like a dick.
Yeah, I did. No, 100%. I mean, obviously, I didn't really go hard on her like that. We have a really good relationship, her and I.
Sure.
Still a client to this day. But yeah, it was one of those ones where I've seen plenty of times where women are able to maintain, a relatively healthy, cycle leading into prep, even if it's, I'm sorry, leading into the show, even if it's losing it relatively close to the show, where some might lose it fucking 12 weeks out, But the bottom line is, and the point that I'm trying to get to here is, just because those are the ones that typically regain that cycle relatively quickly, but they're having, obviously an ovulatory bleed there in a lot of cases, and they're not, producing that luteinized hormone, they're not ovulating. And at the end of the day, it's like, you could be getting that period in very few cases, but I have seen it, and it might not be the answer. But even still, to your point, if you are ovulating, you are getting your cycle, that doesn't mean now that you're not producing still those androgens at a higher level like you were talking about. And that's where we see, like you said, the acne and things of that, which I see that pretty often,
Oh
where
yeah.
it's like, I'm fully recovered. It's like, well, did you get the proper labs done? Because I think that's a big factor, which is tough in some cases, because you do have, especially the newer clients that are going to their doctor maybe and getting lab work, or maybe they're not getting the right help from a coach behind the scenes. Like, we actually do all of our clients lab work, and we have a very, like, we're thankful for the setup that we have for that, so we could dictate exactly what they're getting. We just send it out and they're bing bang boom. We don't have to go through like life extensions or anything like that.
Mhm.
Insurance covers it, so it's one of those things where I could imagine what it's like on the other side of that, when, before we had this, where you are reliant on a doctor and we're trying to get the right prescriptions, or somebody doesn't have the money to go through life extensions all of a sudden, or whatever the excuse is. The bottom line is, if you're not getting the right labs pulled, and you're just going to a doc and they're pulling lipids and a CBC with differential and a CM, like, at the end of the day, you're not really figuring out much of those, I like to call under the hood issues. You know what I mean? That we need to really, like, not just see and consider, and potentially, again, lack of better verbiage, fix. But it's one of those things that we need to be able to understand that route that we're going before we get into a growth phase, because that could only complicate things down the road if it's not, managed well leading into those phases.
Absolutely. And I like that you talked about like what exactly you want to see in blood work post show. And let's actually go ahead and talk about that. So we talked about a CBC, CMP. Those are pretty standard. Like even like I said, your doctors
Mm-hmm.
will, give that to you. I like to see full thyroid panels, so not just TSH. Like I want to see free T3, free T4, reverse T3. Like, that's so important to see how high or potentially normal that that marker is. Obviously, yeah, lipids would be good. Like we can assume that insulin and glucose are going to be in a good spot, but still just add those in there, because especially if you fucked up, like don't think that if you like completely ruined your reverse, that oh well I'm only 6 weeks post show, I should still be insulin sensitive. If you miss the mark, that insulin might not be a 2, it might be a 22. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like just go ahead and get as much as you can done, so that way you exactly see under the hood, and there's no like I don't know, there's no like burying your head in the sand. Because if you're still feeling like dog shit like 12 weeks post show, and you've like finished your reverse, like something's still not right, so go ahead and get checked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, without a doubt. I think the only things that I would add to that, which I feel like I'm missing some off the top of my head right now, but I'm a big fan of checking antibodies post show, thyroid function specifically. So we're talking
That's a good one.
TCO-ABs, TGA-Bs, just, honestly, safe side. If anything else, we know sometimes those are probably going to be a little bit elevated there regardless. But obviously being on the safe side, we've all seen, if you've been in the game long enough, you've seen women end up with full-blown fucking Hashimoto's thyroiditis because of prep, specifically because of prep. But outside of that, yeah, I mean, obviously a full hormone panel too, which could be a little different for males and females. Being that specifically for females, we want a little bit more of a complex reading there. Obviously with progesterone, but even more so with the DHEA, the DHA sulfate, like you were talking about.
Mhm.
I can't. I feel like I'm missing something off the top of my head here. I'd have to open up and look at our panel, but yeah, I think we basically nailed it. Oh, inflammatory markers. I would probably run like a basic one, like a CRP or
Yep.
an HSCRP. But yeah, I mean, I think that's it. Unless I had a particular thing that I was looking at with a particular person that I was worried. I'm also a big fan of an AM cortisol blood marker there, even though that won't tell us the entire picture with cortisol. We all know that. But at the end of the day, it would be that, thing that would drive me to potentially get a urinalysis there if we need to, or maybe even a saliva as a second option there. But yeah, one thing that I would say on the hormonal side, maybe I'm backing up a little bit to the original conversation about, reversing or screwing up your reverse rebounding post show and the food concept. Everybody talks about that, right? Like we all talk about how easy it is, and rightfully so, that you can gain 20, 30 pounds. But I think what a lot of people don't talk about is if you did miss your mark and you did fuck up there originally, remember, it's not just body weight that's going to rebound, right? Like it is hormones that are going to rebound too. And that's where a female is sitting there, whatever it is, 8 weeks post show, 10 weeks post show, and they are still gaining weight even though they're back on their plan, and their ass is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they can't figure out why, even
Mhm.
though they're eating only 30 grams of oatmeal per meal or some shit like that. And it's like, well, because your estrogen is probably 261 and your progesterone's still nowhere to be found, and now you're estrogen dominant because that estrogen rebounded hard post show. So especially
Dude.
again in the enhanced realm, if we're pulling away anything that was there to modulate estrogen towards the end, and or just the androgens, if we're pulling away any of those, we're going to see a severe impact to estrogen eventually. So it's one of those things where we can't look at it through such a prism where it's just like food controls body weight and this that. It's like it's all connected at the end of the day, and we need to be able to again see under the hood to be able to manage that
I
appropriately.
agree. I think it would also be good to talk about like what are some things not to do post prep. And for us, we kind of already hit some, but I think it'd be good to like have it in a nice little neat bow. For me, and I'm an offender with this. Like I know you said you pushed drugs post show, and you were like, oh yeah, that was dumb of me. I competed on a Saturday, as you do, and on Tuesday I had a breast augmentation surgery.
Jesus
Uh,
H Christ, man.
but here's the deal: I was not fear mongered into reverse dieting. Like
Oh, okay.
I was just like, yeah,
You
I
didn't know
just
any better.
competed, whatever. Like I looked anorexic. My surgeon was worried. I could have fucking died on the operating table, but thankfully he didn't.
Yeah.
I nailed my reverse. I had absolutely no issues reverse dieting. Only because though, like when I used to be I used to be morbidly obese when I lost all that weight in a very unhealthy way and was deeply anorexic. I went through that whole like binge purge kind of like rehealing period. I knew what a binge was, and I was
Mhm.
like, I'm not fucking going back there,
I,
dog. So even though I'm like, 3 days post op, like lying
I
here
was
like
gonna say, I
this,
thought you were gonna say you didn't binge because you were so high on Percocets and couldn't poop for 4 days post op. So like, there's no way you're gonna be,
dude.
be able to binge.
Okay, seriously, I'm a pussy with medication. I don't like to
Okay,
take medication.
right,
I took half a Xanax and almost lost my vision. I was like, fuck that, just give me the pain. So I actually
right.
did not take any pain
Oh Christ
meds.
Almighty, that's even that now you're really yeah. I would have
Yeah, so
definitely
don't get surgery
limited my
unless it's
weight and
like
chocolate chip
emergent.
cookies. Yeah. Well, you mentioned it too. Like I was surprised the doctor didn't say anything. Yeah, obviously your vitals came back good. But that's always yes, that's a risk you run when you're getting like the like any type of like elective surgery like that too. Is like, do they really care? Obviously, there's no surgeon in the world that wants somebody to pass on the table, but it's true though. Like that's something where I don't think people would really recognize like how severe that could be in a situation like you are depleted
Mhm.
to every point that we made here. Like you're not in a good state for recovery
Yep.
whatsoever, and
Yep.
I don't, again, I think perception, right? And this is where I think our value as coaches come in sometimes is perceiving, what stress is, where we need recovery. Like if you go under the knife in any way, shape, or form, that's a large amount of
Yep.
recovery. And there's just, you're already spread thin at that point. You know what I mean? So there's all types of complications that can happen, not even on the table, even post surgery there, as far as that recovery aspect is concerned.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And of course, when you go through any surgery, you have to take fucking antibiotics. So it's like, I'm
Yeah.
so
Immune system
lucky.
shot. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so lucky I didn't end up with a fucking gut issue beyond what I probably already had. But it was one of
Yeah.
those things, post show, don't get elective surgery. If
Yeah.
it's emergent surgery, okay, yeah, that fucking sucks. But don't get surgery. Don't ghost your coach. Like, don't hoard the fucking cookies and snacks. Like, I am so over post show binges being glorified by like, bigger name bodybuilders or even just like influencers that like to like just binge for shits and kicks, and they like glorify all of this like dog shit food that like, I'm sorry, you don't need to eat a cake or brownies that are the size of a fucking laptop. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you know what fucking Gam Gam's cookies taste
Hmm.
like, so like have a cookie post show, like a normal sized fucking cookie, and then go eat like, a fucking steak or something. Like something that's actually going to sustain you,
Hmm.
because like we already talked about, like a storm's coming,
Hmm.
honey.
Yeah, the one thing to our side here, right? Which I really think, and not that I want to, speak for you here. And you could say, Tim, fuck you, I'm just genetically elite, and I'll say fine.
Bro,
But
no, I'm not. I'm
my headphone,
normal.
my headphones dropped off. I don't know if it sounds like my audio is horrible now, but
You're good.
um, okay, good, because my AC is blasting in the background. But yeah, one thing that I would say there is a lot of those fitness influencers, especially on the male side, they are just genetically gifted freaks of nature. And I know nobody wants to really prescribe to that concept, heavily. And nobody maybe wants to believe that to that extent. But there's some of us that are going to have to work way fucking harder to be able to get in shape, to step on stage, and even take a fucking fifth place finish. Like, that's just the reality of what genetics are in bodybuilding. Whereas these other people that we're looking at, the reason why they have such a following, the reason why they are so beloved and liked and all that is because they have the genetic capabilities to be in shape, relatively in shape year round. And then for them to get on stage, I'm not saying it's not hard, because again, we're low in body fat. Everybody feels the same. And I'm not taking that away from them. But again, them getting on stage is maybe fucking 300 grams of carbs a day is the load. I just watched a podcast that Dom Kuza did. The guy who's doing the interview is like, yeah, my diet was starting at 1,000 grams of carbs a day, and then we pulled it down when I had to drop. Things got hard. I was 400 grams of carbs a day, but then we cycled back up to 600, back down to 400, up until I'm like, that doesn't even sound real. Like, that makes no. But the guy literally has lines in his face. So I'm like,
Right.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. But again, that the point that I'm trying to illustrate here is just the reality that, like, you get those people post show that really can binge for what is you and I. It would be a total binge, and we would fucking wake up the next morning fucking, fucked up, for lack of better verbiage, let alone up in scale weight and whatnot. But this particular person wakes up perfectly fine. They're completely and totally, like, they don't get that same side effect. Even if they are getting weight gain, their maintenance, is it looks 10 times better than my maintenance is ever going to look. You know what I mean? So it's like their off-season look is tremendous compared to mine. And it's like for them to go right back to it, nobody's going to blink an eye, because again, they've made a career out of it. They made a living off it and whatnot, right? So it's like honestly, if I had an athlete that was able to really push those calories post show, would I tell them that they could eat cookies and whatnot? To your point, I think more importantly, no, because again, it's not really. I would tell them, hey, I don't give a shit what you do tonight. Have at it, whatever. But then the next day, obviously, we're getting back on plan. And again, that's for the very few that are genetically gifted in that way. But I think that what I'm trying to kind of bring to light here is just the reality. Like, you can't look at everybody there and make those decisions for yourself based on that. I have a couple. I was at the gym this morning with 3 athletes that I have competing over the course of the next 3 weeks. And somebody in the gym came up and said, hey, can I bring so-and-so some treats post-show? And this is somebody who's supposed to get her qualification at this particular show. And then we're going to North Americans. And I was like, fuck no, are you out of here? And then, of course, she's looking at me like, what? Not even a little one? I'm like, what the fuck are we talking
Do
about
you
here? Like, you're
want to
still in the
win
middle
or
of
do
your.
you want to eat?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like,
like,
I'm like, yeah, listen, at best case scenario, if you completely and totally bomb and you don't take a qualification, which would be heartbreaking for both of them, then sure, you can go ahead and eat some fucking cookies. But if you win, your reward is the fact that you won. You don't need a goddamn cookie after the show, And it's just one of those things where, again, to your point, it's all glorified, but it's also made worse by some of the. And I know promoters can't be picky. I totally understand it. I get it. But it's like, when you have Buckeye Brownies right outside, within the show
or they're
area.
fucking
Yeah,
sponsors. Yeah, I
exactly.
mean,
Exactly.
it's taking advantage of someone who's very vulnerable,
Yeah.
and I hate that.
Yeah.
I do.
Yep.
I think it's shit. So yeah, don't hoard the stuff post show. Don't ghost your coach post show. Um, 12 weeks after you have like hopefully finished up your reverse diet and you feel mostly recovered, don't enter into a dieting
Mm-hmm.
phase.
Oh
Like,
yeah, that's a good one. Uh,
and that's something that I've seen more on like the female side, of course, where it's like females. I literally was talking to this one girl. This was like 2 years ago. She did her first show. She's like, "Oh, I just finished my reverse diet, so now it's time to diet again." And I was like, "What?"
No, yeah,
I was like, "Explain that one to me." She's like, "Yeah, I finished my reverse diet, so now I can diet again." And I was like,
yeah.
"Make it make sense."
Yeah, I mean, that's one that's I think we're always going to have to deal with that one. Not even that, but like just the constant. I think again, perception and bringing a different perception to the client sometimes. It's tough though because I think I don't know if I've ever had a female client that didn't think that it was ready to diet again, like whatever. 20 weeks post show. And I'm like, we just started an off season. Like we legitimately just started a growth phase and you want to diet again? They're like, yeah, I'm feeling kind of fluffy. Like, no shit. Welcome to the off season.
Yeah, tough shit. Like that's what bodybuilding
Yeah.
is building up your goddamn
Well,
body.
this is why for me it's been an important thing here the last couple of years to make sure that we have people that we are not putting right into prep. And like just about everybody that we have on the team right now has either been a member of the team for an extended period of time, has gone through an off season, or just has a general experience with us for extended periods of time. And I know, I hear people talk like that all the time. And even myself, I used to say, like, it'd be nice if everybody would come for X period of time. And I understand not every coach has that availability, I guess, as far as their business is concerned. But for us, these last couple of years, it has been a mandatory thing where it's like, hey, you come to us and you want to compete this year, great. We'll see you on stage at the end of 2025, maybe early 2026. Let's get into a process to do that now. That way, there's a better comprehension of all of those kind of peaks and valleys post show. So, I don't know if there's a point to take away in there, to be more prepared. The other thing, though, that I would bring up here is don't fucking schedule a vacation. Maybe that's in line or on par with the surgery thing, but that's something that I still see very often. And I have people tell me now where it's like, hey, just so you know, I'm scheduled for this. Why the fuck did you schedule that post show? Like, I'm sorry, but like the reality is, you have two options. It's either you're going to go away and you're going to live like a bodybuilder the entire time you're away, packing your food, preparing everything, or you're going to be fat by the time you come back. Those two choices are yours. I'm not responsible for that. You let me know how you're going to play this one because it wasn't a smart idea to book that vacation. I know I'm your coach. I'm not, in charge of your life, but like this definitely be something that you should, speak with your coach about before you decide to do it.
But Coach Tim, I want to look good in a bikini.
Yeah. You can look at a bikini, man. You just got to bring fucking broccoli to every meal. That's all. You know what I mean?
Oh my god.
Tupperware.
Dude, I don't understand how they can afford, like, people must
Yeah.
be so fucking rich that like I just like am so not at that level where it's like, if you have to ask the price, you're too poor for it. It's like contest prep is so fucking expensive with everything that you have to buy. I could not imagine also like a week post show being like, oh, by the way, we're going to Disney World. But
Yeah. Yeah. Or,
must be nice.
yeah. I
Yeah,
don't
so
know.
don't go on vacation.
I,
That's a
I
good
don't
one.
know. I don't know what's worse: the vacation immediately post show, or the vacation at like 2 weeks out that nobody told you about. So I've had both.
So
I've had both.
listen, like my 1 week out was on a vacation. I was evacuating from a hurricane. So kind of a different situation, but still peak week was very stressful because there was a hurricane. Because I live in South Carolina, so like we had to haul ass to move more inland. So that was definitely stressful, but I would not call that a
Oh,
vacation.
okay. I thought you were saying you were on vacation and you got evacuated. So
No,
it was.
no. So I had to evacuate to safety during peak week, and then I got breast surgery. So it's like that. That
Oh,
was
okay. So you had a very solid 3 week string there of events.
big brain.
Yeah. But no, yeah, no. I mean, obviously that's something that's out of your control entirely, though. I mean, at the end of the day, somebody planning something at those times. I've had it too, where people are like 6 weeks out, like, oh, I had this trip to Disney World planned. Why the fuck didn't you tell me that? You know, we started contest prep 30 fucking weeks ago. You couldn't tell me then. You
Be like, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were fucking goofy. Like, what
Yeah.
the fuck is wrong with
but
you?
but I guess that's not necessarily par for the course here in terms of post show, maintenance and issues there. But yeah, I think a lot of this though, now that we've talked about it for a while, does come back to obviously health, right? Communication with your coach, right, and being able to really manage those two things well enough, and that goes on both ends of the spectrum. So if it's a coach that's listening, that's the job is as much ours as it is theirs. We're
Mhm.
not as theirs. We could say they can't go on vacation or whatever. Not can't go on vacation, but maybe shouldn't or plan better. We could say they should do all these things, but at the end of the day, if we're not telling them that up front, if there's not some sort of like built-in comprehension of that to the communication that you have just by nature of the process, right? A good, I had again a client that I met today. She competes this week, so she's a couple days out right now. She had a wedding with her friend here, literally this past weekend, and she was a bridesmaid or a bride of honor. I mean, she was in the wedding, right? So
Yeah, she was some wedding Harlem bitch. We got it.
yeah,
Yeah.
in there, she was in that thing doing it, right? So now I basically she told me like a couple days out because we had to meet and we were trying to schedule it to see her in person. And I was like, wait a second, you're in a wedding thing? She's like, Tim, don't fucking worry about it. Like, I know you. Like, I don't need to explain this to you. I don't need you. I don't need you to tell me that I have to eat out of Tupperware. I'm planned, baby. Everything's 100% set up. And literally went to this thing and ended up we were stuck. It was just that point in prep where we were stuck, and I'm basically talking her off a ledge every day because she hasn't lost a pound in the last whatever 4 weeks or whatever. She was still just there, right? She was just there. I wanted to get off like 3 or 4 more pounds, but and that was the weight that I had set for her. But we were just there, just a few pounds short. She goes to this wedding and now literally showed up today, nailed the weight that I wanted her to be before we started loading regardless. So it's one of those things where it's like, again, I didn't need to specific or explicitly tell her you can't go to a wedding a week out from a show or that it's not smart, but it was the built-in communication that we had over the time of her prep and over the time of her being a client where she knew what the expectation was. She knew what she shouldn't do. Right? I don't want to say wasn't allowed because at the end of the day, if you need to be told that you're allowed or not allowed to do something, you probably shouldn't be prepping. It should be something that you are just accepting the information the coach is giving to you. Like, hey, that's not smart. It's not going to get you first place. And if you're choosing to do things otherwise, again, you probably shouldn't be prepping for a bodybuilding show.
I agree. She smelled those Jordan pastel almonds, and that's what did it.
Damn straight.
Awesome. Why don't we kind of wrap things up and answer the few questions that I did get? And then if any stragglers have questions, we can answer those. The first one was, should you begin a rebound cycle right away or go into a health phase? I think we already did a really good job talking about how, yes, enter into a health phase, or we called it a recovery phase. I think it's also important to define rebound. So in her rebound, she's talking about actually running androgens and entering into an off season with drugs versus when we said rebound earlier, we were more talking about rebound in a way that you fucked
Yeah.
up, you rebounded so hard with body fat. So I think that's good to kind of differentiate there. But yeah, we already answered that question. So next one, when and how to taper off fat burners. I think that's a great question.
Yeah, there's some nuance there depending on the fat burner that we're talking about, right? I mean, obviously, we're going to talk about the big two most predominantly, Clen and T3. Honestly, it really depends on the scenario. Like, there's going to be plenty of times where that Clen might be brought down or completely totally out, during peak week, prior to peak week, leading into that show, so we can fill up appropriately. So that might not be as much of a concern post show, but I think the big one there is the T3 that we want to really kind of taper off on. And you got to make sure, at least in the way that I do it, is I'm managing bringing down that T3 while bringing up the food, right? I'm going to bring down that T3 in accordance with bringing up the food, but probably keeping even just 12.5 milligrams of T3 in while I get that food up to a heaviest point, and then I'll start to pull that T3 entirely out. But yeah, anything else? Obviously, Himbe's going to be out by then. I've actually been using a lot of semaglutide lately. Not with any bikini competitors, but classes that we're trying to drive a little bit more conditioning. And that's been something that I found can be very valuable as we continue to. I do titrate it down. To that post-show recovery phase so that we can get calories up appropriately, but I might still have somebody on anywhere between 3 to 5 IUs depending on the which again is less than 0.25 milligram. But again, I don't know what am I missing that would be really prevalent.
I would say I wouldn't call it GH a fat burner. It mobilizes the fat, but GH is one of those things where it's you might honestly just keep it in for the sake of the fact that it's not really going to do you any harm because it's not adding more stimulation. Obviously, if you're a bigger guy and you're running 5+ IUs, maybe you want to tone that down just for the sake of potential rebound with inflammation or holding on to water that might not make you feel so good. But like for females, if you're running like 1 to 2 IUs to hold fullness into the show, or maybe you still need to diet off a little bit more, like I don't mind leaving in growth hormone personally. Like as long as funds permit it, it's not going to do harm unless, like I said, you're really abusing it. But girls, I mean, that to my knowledge, the athletes that I work with, we're not using more than two, three
Yeah.
IUs.
And that's the thing. I would always bring it down the GH at that point because,
Sure.
like you mentioned, for a larger guy, like we're talking, blood glucose dysregulation, all like you said,
Mhm.
so present. Like at the end of the day, I would rather just bring those things down. But keeping it in growth hormone might even be, especially if I've removed it weeks out for somebody just because of water retention or a generic version that I'm unsure of. I might even put that back in immediately, maybe
Sure.
a really low dosage to be able to support a little bit more fat mobilization.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we actually did get a live question.
I can't
Is there
on my end.
a time frame immediately post show that correlates with blowing your reverse? I would say the first 2 weeks are the most like just complete like shatter proof. It's like, I mean, obviously, it's like, we're talking about reversing. Like, you fuck up any point, like, there's going to be damage done, like, in some capacity. Because, again, you don't want to, like, fuck up and, like, oh, I gotta restrict again, because then you're just entering to that, like, binge purge cycle that's very fucking hard to break. But in my opinion, I would say the first 2 weeks are, like, probably the most difficult, and you're the most, like, susceptible to going extra, extra hard just because of all the things we talked about early on when it comes to your mental state, dopamine, leptin and ghrelin, body fat, just coming down off of your show. But of course, Tim, if you want to say something else, yeah, go
The
ahead.
only thing that I would say on top of that is, to me, it's very dependent on, again, what was that process leading into the show? You know what I
Mm,
mean? I have multiple different people going into shows right now. One of them is, again, the female that I just spoke about. She will be starting her load yesterday, and we're going to just reverse her into the show these next few days, which might not seem like that much, but this is her first
mhm,
show of multiple shows. So now I have 2 weeks, time in between the next show. I'll tell you right now, there's probably not going to be one more low day on her plan. She's just going to be reversed all the way through. And she'll most likely be eating somewhere around like 250, 275 grams of carbs going into that next show. And we're talking about, she's at 175 today. So she'll be at 200 plus grams of carbs for a solid 2 or 3 weeks leading into that second show. You know what I mean? So the
mhm,
bottom line there is, she, to your point, it's sensitive that first couple of weeks for sure, because again, the mental side of things, right? But I would say the person that I have to have that I'm really like grinding them all the way through, and I might get a more aggressive load a couple days, there, especially for a male, a couple days before a show. The bottom line is for them, they might be super sensitive for the next 4 weeks or so before I can really get that food to a level where things are starting to calm down again. So
mhm.
I would say bare minimum. But if you're somebody that really had to suffer through your prep, you might be looking at a much longer time frame
Mhm.
there.
Absolutely. So the next question, from your experience, is that also positively associated with fat gain? And I would say fat gain and also inflammation, which also is going to add into even more fat gain. And then the fact of, depending on what you're eating, like we're talking about losing that insulin sensitivity real quickly, and then potentially even looking at gut issues. So yes, fat gain, but again, you're also fucking with systems that have been fucked with way too long, and you're just setting yourself up for
Yeah.
failure.
Yeah. So what was the question?
She said, from your experience, is that also positively associated with fat gain? And I'm going back off of blowing your reverse.
Okay. I was going to say is what positively associated with fat gain. But yeah, blowing the reverse is obviously I mean, like I said in the thing, I think that's the tip of the iceberg. And that's what we all see superficially very easily is that it's a lot of fat gain. But underneath all that, we're talking about hormone mismanagement, gut mismanagement, like you said. I think people miss that. To me, a rebound isn't just food anymore and weights. It's all these different factors that are obviously going to be issues now that need to be fixed long term.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tim, thank you so very much for your time today and hopping on this live with me. I mean, it was nice to freaking meet you. I know we've been following each other for a really long time, but I do appreciate your time today, man.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate you asking.
Of course. And guys, thanks so much for your time this evening, and we'll catch you back another time when I hop on a live. But y'all have a great rest of your evening. Thanks again. Bye.